in the criminal justice system, offenses against the wolfpack are considered especially heinous. In Raleigh, the dedicated geneticists that evaluate DNA samples are members of the elite squad known as the Pack Protectors. This is their story. Dun dun. Tuffy 2 is visiting the NC State Vet School for his annual checkup and grooming for a big game against UNC. After being checked out by a vet student and receiving a clean bill of health, Tuffy 2 was put in a cozy kennel where he would spend the night. In the morning, when it was time for him to get groomed, the vet student found him dead in his kennel. The vet student immediately called campus police. They quickly arrived on the scene and took samples from Tuffy's kennel. The lab found a piece of DNA from the samples. Campus police then analyzed the security camera footage. They saw 4 suspects going into the room where Tuffy 2 was sleeping: Mr. Wolf, Mrs. Wolf, Baby Wolf, which is Mr. and Mrs. Wolf's pup, and Rameses. All 4 suspects were asked to provide a DNA sample that would be compared to the sample found in Tuffy 2's kennel. The DNA samples from each individual and evidence from the crime scene were amplified for 2 different VNTR loci and run on separate gels to create DNA fingerprints. This first gel represents loci 1. Let's compare the evidence to Mr. Wolf first. The DNA fingerprint from the crime scene matches the one from Mr. Wolf, so he is important to pay attention to as a match. Now looking at Mrs. Wolf, her DNA fingerprint is not a match to the crime scene DNA, but we should not rule her out just yet. Same as his mom, Baby Wolf is not a match to the crime scene sample. We can also tell that Baby Wolf is indeed the pup of Mr. and Mrs. Wolf. While his DNA is not a perfect match to either parent, we can see he gets 1 allele from mom and 1 from dad. Now let's look at Rameses. His sample appears to be a match to the crime scene DNA. So for loci 1, Mr. Wolf and Rameses are both a match, but let's take a look at loci 2. So comparing the DNA from Mr. Wolf to the crime scene, we can see that he is not a match. Looking at the sample from Mrs. Wolf, we can see she is a match for the DNA from the crime scene. Looking at the DNA from Baby Wolf, we can see that he is not an exact match to the crime scene DNA. And finally, looking at Rameses' DNA, we can see that he matches the crime scene DNA exactly. So for loci 2, we have Mrs. Wolf and Rameses as a match. So let's compare the results for both loci. In loci 1, we have Mr. Wolf as a match, as well as Rameses. For loci 2, Rameses was also a match, as well as Mrs. Wolf. After looking at the data and comparing both loci, we can conclude that Mr. and Mrs. Wolf are innocent because they only match at 1 loci. Since Rameses is a match at both loci, he will be charged with the death of Tuffy 2.